You're listening to the We Are Libertarians podcast network. Find all of our shows at wearelibertarians.com.
Are you a diehard comic book collector?
Or maybe a lapsed fan?
Maybe even someone who has never picked up a comic book in their life. Hi, I'm Remso Martinez.
And I'm Mark Claire. Every single Wednesday at the Second Print Comics podcast, Remso and I take a deep dive into the storylines, character arcs, moments, and events that made us the fans we are today.
Tune in every Wednesday for new episodes available on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and wherever else podcasts are available.
Check out more from the Second Print Comics podcast at secondprintcomics.com.
Prepare yourself. You're on the run with Remso W. Martinez.
I don't get many strange requests. Maybe it's because my standard for what is strange is already pretty low. You know, we talk to homeless people, talk about dead people talking to alive people, aliens, all that stuff, and then everything else in between, because, you know, this is a political show. It's a family political show that rarely talks about politics, but sometimes we gotta dive into the deep end of the pool, children, and start getting into the things that ultimately do matter and do impact all of our lives. And over the past year, we've been talking about all of this and more over here on The Run. You know, the skills you need to go ahead and adapt to harsh environments, such as what we saw with the lockdowns, understanding the science from both sides of every crazy political aisle, and just trying to understand the drastically changing world we're living in. But I went ahead and received an email regarding a new documentary. It's called Follow the Science on lockdowns and liberty. And what this basically is doing is it's taking an objective look at what has happened over the past year and a half. And it feels so strange now that we're already starting to see some projects like this coming out, because it still feels like we're still in the midst of the story. But when it comes to really the first 6 months, primarily from March of 2020 onward, shit got weird. We were fighting each other for toilet paper. Wendy's ran out of beef. You know, everyone was buying guns. Like, it's weird. So what I want to do is I want to go ahead and talk about this with the director of this film. But because of the way that y'all work, I know how you work, Reddit and everyone else, we're going to go ahead and respect their privacy. But I can't go ahead and just call this person anonymous. So I went ahead and went on Google, pulled up a random name generator, and I saw Gary came up. So we're just going to call this gentleman Gary. Gary, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Remso. Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
So, you know, but both of us are laughing at this. This is a little ridiculous, but the topic and the seriousness of this topic are not ridiculous. It's not something to laugh at. If anything, it's something we need to be having a bigger conversation about. You went ahead and sent me the link to the trailer for this, as you're currently trying to raise funds to go ahead and, you know, finish and produce this film. I am fearful for what happens next for you, because I think, you know, especially if the listeners of this program, I think you're going to meet your goal. I think you're going to get a lot of people watching this, and hopefully you'll change a lot of minds in the process. But it's a sensitive topic, because for people that want to try and look at this like rational, common sense adults, this is not the climate that is really hospitable for that. So let's start from the beginning. What prompted you to want to go ahead and start on this journey? Where are you currently at, and where are you trying to take this film?
Absolutely. Well, one thing I should clarify off the bat, I will not be the director on the project. I'm one of the producers.
All right.
So we do have somebody attached who may be our director. He'll definitely be involved in the project. We're still kind of solidifying our team, but
okay.
I'm definitely
Gary
one
1,
of the
Gary
producers.
2, Gary 3, Gary 4.
Exactly. Lots of Garys.
Lots of Garys. I dig it.
So not to pitch another podcast, but this all originated from a podcast that Tom Woods did. He was interviewing a gentleman named Ian Miller, who has done a lot of amazing charts comparing the data in various areas around the world. And Tom said, you know, I really wish somebody would do a quality documentary about all of this stuff. It's got to get out there. And I was listening, and I said, yeah, gosh, I really wish somebody would do a documentary about this. And I looked in the mirror and I was like, well, maybe I should do a documentary about this. And so I called up a couple of my entertainment industry buddies, and I said, I don't know how serious I am about this, but let me float this by you. And they're like, oh God, yeah, it probably needs to be done. And so we brainstormed for a while, and we weren't sure in the beginning that we wanted to be anonymous about it, but the more we batted it around and consulted with our families, who basically said, we really don't want your necks on the line with this project.
You're speaking with the former outreach director of Parler, so I totally understand where you're coming from.
Yeah, absolutely. So we decided that we needed to kind of create a shield for ourselves. And in the process of doing that, we actually decided that this production company, which we're calling Sound Mind Creative Group, will be a good space for future projects for people who want to create projects that are somewhat heterodox, that may run against the mainstream. And my sense is there are probably a lot of people in the entertainment industry who don't make projects because they're afraid of what the consequences might be. And we think this may have legs in the long run, at least as long as cancel culture is a real thing in our world. And I mean, hopefully that'll go away soon, but unfortunately, I don't see that happening in the near future.
Absolutely. And I mean, the crazy thing is, when I was getting involved with this crazy world outside of our windows, I grew concerned when people like Alex Jones were basically kicked off the internet in 2018. Yeah. Now, am I an Alex Jones fan? No. But, he wasn't committing a crime. He had unpopular opinions. But, Bill Maher has things I don't like to hear. What's his name? Keith Olbermann says things that I don't like to hear. Just because I don't like to hear something doesn't mean that I want to go ahead and completely shutter it. So when he got taken down, I was like, okay, what we're doing is we're starting at the very edges, and we're going to keep moving towards the middle. Yeah. And eventually what is considered publicly acceptable speech and topics of conversation are slowly going to erode. And not many people know about this, but I'm a regular contributor to The World According to Ben Stein, Ben Stein's show, which is on 3 days a week. And we talk about all this stuff. And an episode that we did about a month ago was removed from YouTube. Now, Ben Stein, let's look at him, for example. He's a Keynesian economist, worked for Richard Nixon. He was from Ferris Bueller. He's a big celebrity. He's as moderate center right as they come. Everyone likes him, but he's an outspoken religious advocate. And he did a documentary called Expelled way yonder back. And because of that, he basically got expelled from Hollywood. And now he's on YouTube with me. So I don't know if this is more about me or less about him. But if that can happen to Ben Stein, of all people, it can happen to anybody. And for folks that, might not have the name recognition as him, we don't often get, certain leniences. If anything, for us normal folk, the penalties are often way, way heftier. So, I mean, as you were discussing this with your partners and everything, what were some of the other obstacles that came in your way other than just the reaction you might get from people?
Well, certainly, the three of us work actively in the entertainment industry. And, we've seen lately that the entertainment industry, people are losing massive jobs. Gina Carano is a good example. And careers are, disappearing down the drain for people that are being outspoken. So for the three of us, I mean, all of us would love to be in a position where we could have income that's not dependent on the entertainment industry, or at least the major corporate aspect of the entertainment industry. But that's not the reality right now. So that was certainly a major financial concern for us, is putting our necks on the line, creating this. And, all of us have seen on Facebook, I know early on in all of this back in the spring of last year, I started putting feelers out onto Facebook, going against the mainstream narrative, and just found myself getting piled on by people, and no just no sense or awareness that maybe there was another side to the story. I would post articles that said, hunger may be increasing massively as a result of the lockdowns around the world. Oh, but, we don't want people to die of COVID. So, that'll take care of itself. And just on and on and on, stories of a lack of receptivity to any position that was outside of the mainstream narrative. And it became clear to all of us that the general tide was against anything that was contrary to that.
The trailer you have for the film is, it's a teaser, which is basically trying to show people the general concept and the type of themes that you'll go into as you actually begin to film and produce this documentary. And for some folks, they might just think, oh, it's just a montage of news clips. But that's the thing. You pulled from pretty much everybody. And that is something that I don't even see reporters do on major networks. I don't see Fox really do that. I don't see CNN really do that. OAN doesn't do that. MSNBC doesn't do that. It seems like, and this is coming from somebody that used to work in print media primarily, when it comes to the mainstream news, it's less about putting out stories and it's more about two things, which are not new to listeners of the show. It's propaganda, and it's basically another way of fueling fundraising for the big major political parties. And as I consider myself kind of like a political atheist. I fit nowhere. It gets frustrating. So, the act of just trying to look at things objectively isn't just what some people would think the simple route. It's probably the bravest route by now, because I got COVID in January of this year. In fact, I caught the most severe form of it. I caught COVID pneumonia. COVID pneumonia, for those of you that don't know, is COVID plus pneumonia. It's not as severe as walking pneumonia, but it lasts twice as long. So I had it going into March until I could breathe properly. And at the end of it, when people were asking me about my experience and everything, I basically just said, one, COVID is real. But secondly, it's not the worst thing I've ever had in my life. And I'm still not getting a vaccine. And this is coming from somebody that, did used to smoke cigarettes and up until 2020 actually caught strep throat every year. And I would rather have COVID pneumonia over and over than catch strep throat. And that went ahead and peeved a bunch of people the wrong way, because they're like, you caught it and you got the most, terrible form of it. And you're still not getting a vaccine. I'm like, no, I don't even get flu shots. Well, why? Are you one of those anti-vaxxer people? I'm like, no, I love vaccines. I hate polio. In fact, when I joined the Army in 2013, I had to get an anthrax shot. So give me whatever, but give me the things that I want to consent to. I don't even get flu shots, because when I get them, I get full on flu. Like, it's just one of those things where it's like, when I don't get them, I only end up catching it anyway. Let it be my choice, but respect my ability to have that choice. And that's the thing. And in the commercial, what we see is everyone from, Newsom of California to Cuomo to Fauci, they're taking away choice. And it was all done in the name of fear. And we're just now getting past this phase where now people are really starting to question, what was this worth it or not? So, in terms of the intent of what you're looking at, what is the real focus that you want to go ahead and draw people's awareness to in this film? Is it just the reaction to the lockdowns? Was it the concept of it? I mean, where are we going?
It's primarily analyzing the political response to COVID. We're not all that interested in looking too much about, I think we all believe COVID is real. It's not, there's no kind of conspiracy theory here. We want to look at the data. We want to look at the real science and see if the choices that were made were supported at all by the real data. And we also want to look at the stories of people whose lives have been decimated by these policies. So those are really the two critical nodes of the project. And I should mention there are two phases of the project. We're planning on releasing a short version, 20 to 30-minute version in the fall. And then a feature-length project that will be finished probably in the first half of 2022. And the reason for that is we feel some urgency to get something out right away because there may be a resurgence of cases in the fall and a resurgence of the lockdowns, which
Like Dark Winter Part 2.
Exactly. And, people are already talking about it. And that really concerns us. And to whatever degree what we create can mitigate that some, we hope that it can. The long form project we see is hopefully more of a retrospective that will be looking back on what happened and going more in depth into how this could happen. How is it that we so willingly gave up our rights around the world, just basically laid down and said, okay, you want us to give up our fundamental rights. We'll do that because we're in fear. And also to look at kind of the broader implications, because our belief, the core belief of the group of people making this is that this should never happen again. There's really, the deepest layer of this project is that this kind of response is never justified, no matter how intense the crisis is.
So it's not going to be like a plandemic.
No,
Okay.
It's definitely our intent with this is to reach as much of the mainstream as possible. Obviously, we know there are people who will not pay attention to it and who will immediately dismiss it. We see our target market being what we call the live and let live crowd. We believe there's a large cross-section of people across the country and the world who basically believe people should be left alone to live their lives the way they want to, even if they don't always play that out in all political circumstances, but they have a basic understanding that that's how people should be left alone. We think a lot of people who may have that orientation had that stripped away in part by the fear that was instilled in them by governments and the mainstream media. And the goal of this is to restore that belief, to say, first of all, the science doesn't support these measures. And secondly, you need to pay attention to what's going on in your own sphere of influence and be able to make the choices that you think are right according to your values and your risk assessment. And so we want to basically appeal to as wide a cross-section as possible. And in order to do that, we need to have a very narrow focus. We probably are not going to get into issues of vaccines unless it's about vaccine passports, because that's another infringement of liberty that we think is an important outgrowth of this. Our focus is really going to be primarily the lockdowns, probably some on mask mandates.
So I know too many people in and outside of Hollywood, within the media primarily, who are planning, I'm not going to say it's similar projects like yours, but it's within the same sphere, except here's the big difference between you and them. They're all waiting for a Republican to become president, because in their minds, if they can at least get a Republican administration, they'll have, to an extent, some more degrees of, socially acceptable protection, even though when it comes to the cancel crowd and everything else, nothing is socially acceptable in that range. So by then, if they do that, and as I've told them, it won't matter. The damage will be done. The conversation talking points will be fixed. There's no bravery in that. Whereas what you're doing with this film is, to put it bluntly, you're willing to kind of lay down the barbed wire so that way other people could have a chance of talking about this. Because that is the thing that people don't understand. I get flack often because when it comes to the discussion regarding social media, should it be nationalized? Should it be reformed? What should we do? Whose side are you on? It gets real murky. But what I tell people is, it's not about using somebody else's platform to get your voice out. It's about creating the content and the materials and the products and creating the services to go directly to people. I mean, what you're doing is what I've recommended for other people who have tried, especially to self-finance their own documentaries. I know somebody's trying to do something about, refugees in Syria. And I told them, well, don't just go on Facebook, go to churches. It was before the lockdowns when you could still go to churches and things
Right.
like that. I'm like, go directly to the people. And I feel like right now that direct contact and that ability to work directly with people is the most important thing right now, because I can already tell you're going to have a hard time pushing this on social media.
Yep.
You're going to have a hard time keeping a newsletter list. I'll be surprised if you're going to be able to keep a website if this gets more popular. But that's what you knew going into this. So how do you plan on getting the message out about this? Because you want to raise, what was it, 300K?
That's actually a phase.
Okay.
We're aiming for 100K for the short version. Right now, we're aiming for 300K in total in order to already start laying the groundwork for the feature length project. And ultimately, in terms of crowdfunding, we're looking to raise 500K to really fund the full length documentary. We debated back and forth about what the right price point would be on this, and we decided that we needed to make it as high as reasonable, because we really want to make this as high quality as possible. We want to bring the right team of talent on board, and those things are going to cost money. We want a very strong director. We want a very strong animator to animate the data. There's talent that we are hoping to have involved that will be on screen, and that will come at a cost. We want a very well-crafted soundtrack. So there are all of those items, including legal and insurance and all of that stuff that any project needs to have in order to be done right. So back to your question of how we're going to get this out there. I mean, an aspect of what we're going to have to be paying for is somebody who really knows how to handle and navigate PR, and part of their job is going to be figuring out the new landscape, because obviously the old guard platforms are quickly disappearing for people who are saying things like what we're saying. I am encouraged to see that some things still are up on YouTube that I am a bit surprised about. Some things critical of the lockdowns that have been there for a while. So some things slip under the radar, but obviously the more...
It's not because of grace, it's because of inability to find it.
That's right.
Which is the only saving grace in all of this. I mean, it's one of the reasons why this is not a video show primarily, because, I think it was a few months ago, you had a bunch of people at the New York Times and Vox. They were saying, the next phase of our war to save our democracy is to go after podcasts, and Apple, who hosts everything, they're just like, I don't know if we could do that. Not because in their hearts they're probably thinking two things. One, for the more ideological people, they're thinking, yes, it's about time. The others are thinking, we're going to lose a shit ton of money if we do that. But, I mean, the genie's out of the bottle. There are millions of podcasts out there putting out thousands of hours of content hourly. So, I mean, it's one of the few fields where they're going to keep it up, just because, if they try and even take a scalpel to it, like some people are suggesting, you're going to end up cutting an artery. It's going to create a giant issue.
Absolutely.
It's not just because I have a face for radio, folks. There's a strategy behind this.
So I should mention, since we were talking about the fundraising aspect, I mean, we really are hoping that people will get behind this project, not just because we want to get it made, but we see this as an investment in all of our futures. And so if people are interested in supporting us, the website for that is fundraiser.com, and that's spelled FUNDRAZR.com, and then /follow the science. So fundraiser.com /follow the science.
And folks, I'll make it easy. I'll just include it in the show notes too.
Great, perfect. That. And there, like you mentioned, Remso, we've got a 5-minute trailer, and that, you mentioned that it's basically clips of various people back to back, creating a kind of narrative and contrast. That's just, this all started for us about 2 months ago. So that's something that we put together quickly in the attempt to get some interest in the project. That's not, it's representative of the ideas, but it's not representative of the style or how we'll approach this. We plan to have interviews with scientists, with people who have been studying this carefully. One person that we've been in discussion with already is Nick Hudson at Pando, which is a great organization, pandata.org, that's doing a lot of analysis of all of the various data. And then I mentioned Ian Miller earlier. We're also in discussion with him about having him as part of the project. So we'll have a lot of interviews of those folks. We'll have interviews of people whose lives have been turned upside down by all of this. And that's, it's that contrast between the data that shows that these choices made no difference. These choices to lock people down made no difference. And the devastation that was caused by them. These people lost their businesses, their lives, their health for nothing, essentially. And that's the real terrible tragedy of all of this. And these are tragedies that people on the left should be concerned about. They should be the ones championing the small businesses who are having to shut down.
I want to pick your brain on that, though, because even a year and a half ago, I would have been totally on board with you about that. But even now, as I look around, and maybe I'm jaded, so I could be completely wrong about this. Maybe it's just because of my current headspace. I don't think they care anymore. Like it used to be, and this is coming from somebody that's a self-identified libertarian, that used to be with the right when the right is right and be with the left when the left is right. Mm-hmm. I don't even think the left gives a shit anymore. I genuinely don't. I think they're willing to have people sleep on the streets if it means that other people can deliver them their groceries. And they could sit at home wearing 2 masks and a condom, because why not? And go ahead and criticize people online. I don't genuinely think they care anymore. I'm also one of those people. I don't even think, not to get political, I don't believe the election was rigged. I don't know if Joe Biden got 80 million votes, but what I do know is that I genuinely believe he got a lot of votes of people that didn't like Joe Biden, but
right.
They liked the idea of more lockdowns and they didn't like Trump.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think there are all kinds of people on both sides of the political spectrum, and I think there are certainly ideologues who have a devotion to the party, no matter whether the party is right or wrong on both sides. I know a lot of people on the left being in the entertainment industry, and I know the hearts of those people, and I want to believe those hearts are in the right place. I know that they're good, compassionate people and very concerned about the welfare of others. And I can't say I've mined their depths. I haven't gotten into in-depth conversations about these issues because I just, in general, haven't found it productive to do so. But I'll say this. There are members of my family who are very, I wouldn't call them like hard left, but they're definitely left sympathizers. And I've talked with them fairly extensively about this, and they're starting to come around. They're starting to say, yeah, we are starting to see that maybe the lockdowns weren't a great idea. And so I do think that there's a contingent of people that can still be reached. I was just having this discussion with one of my collaborators on the project yesterday, and he was saying, I think there are people who on the left who just don't care, and who actually take some pleasure in seeing the suffering of the businesses who are going under, and especially if they're big corporations, but those aren't the ones that are going under. It's the small. I mean,
it reminds me, my first year out of college, I was an intern at the American Conservative, and it was when all those hurricanes were like destroying Texas, and it completely screwed up the Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, Florida, Louisiana, Alabama, and you had people on CNN saying, "I don't believe in God, but this is the universe's wrath on the red states." And I remember seeing people online, and I'll go as far as say I don't think most people online are real. Call them bots or whatever. I don't think it's actual people. But it just blew my mind. It's like we're celebrating the misery of others, people that we don't know. And, it's not like it was entirely Republicans who got their houses flooded. It was a lot of Democrats. It was a lot of just regular, everyday people.
Well, and the same thing with the riots. I mean, when you see the business owners whose lives were destroyed, whatever race they were, by the riots, there were so many excuses.
One out of every three. I think it was 1 out of every 3, and this was a Business Insider article. Business Insider, not what people think of as right-wing media. Business Insider. 1 out of every 3 black businesses in America either shut down as a result of the lockdowns or the riots. 1 out of every 3. So you want to say that Black Lives Matter and that you support black-owned businesses. Well, good job. You shut them down either by regulation or by fire. But nobody likes to talk about that.
Right. Yeah. The costs of all of this have to be discussed. And that's part of the impetus behind this project, is to bring those stories out into the light.
Yeah, go ahead.
Let me say one thing real quick about that. We are seeking stories that will best kind of work in the narrative of the project. So at our website, which is soundmindcreativegroup.com, we have a portal where people can submit stories either that they've experienced personally, that people they know, or even if they're just aware of a story that's kind of important about this. And everybody's privacy will be protected. Obviously, ultimately, we'll want to get people on camera and do an interview with them. But we would love to receive just a plethora of stories from all kinds of stories. They're the obvious stories of the business owners who've lost their business, but they're different. They're different indirect stories, people whose health has been compromised because they haven't been able to get medical attention. I heard of a kid who was bound for college, and now basically all of the savings of the family is gone, and the kid can't go to college now. So there are all these kinds of stories that we're seeking. So please feel free to share any with us, everybody that's out there.
And I was kind of rambling a moment ago, but it doesn't sound like you just have one big project or even just a couple of phases. It almost sounds like you could go on tour of this for years. Because, to me, you don't have a film. You have a campaign. And I think that is needed now more than ever, because and I'm already predicting this, let's say whether it's a couple years or a couple terms, we get a Republican president in, and then all my, Beltway friends start doing their limited series and their stuff and their HBO docs and stuff like that. It's just going to be, they're doing it for awards. They're doing it as basically something to throw on their resume. They're not really doing it to help people. But, we're in the fight right now. And this isn't a criticism. It was just an observation. I brought this up at the beginning of the show. It's like, it feels weird because you're talking about something, and from the outset, it's like a, beginning, middle, end story. But for me, it feels like we're still in the middle of this.
Mm. Yeah, well, we clearly are. And like I said, part of the point of getting the short out there is to do what we can to circumvent that. And I don't think that even a year from now, which is kind of what we're projecting for the future, this isn't going to be over. The lockdowns around coronavirus may be over, but what this has started, to my mind, is a denigration of the principles that Western civilization is built upon. The whole notion of what science is and how science should play a role in public policy. It's part of the reason we called the project Follow the Science, because that bromide has been put out there, and science now is treated as a dogma. And that's science has been used that way, obviously, by different despots throughout the years. But real science is a process, and it's never settled. Even the most obvious ideas, things that we take to be obvious ideas, have to be continually questioned, because the whole point of science is the fallibility. And so that's certainly something that we are going to look at in the long form project. And we feel like that's a really fundamentally important challenge to how a lot of people have started to think about science, and especially something like COVID. If you're talking about evolution, okay, that's pretty settled, even though there's still debate about it. We should still be open to challenges to it and take them seriously if evidence comes forward. But, that's been debated for hundreds of years. What COVID is and how it impacts people and what the symptoms are and what the survivability rate is and all of those things, it's new information. And to think that politicians and pundits have those answers is utterly ridiculous. Those answers come about from people on the ground making choices, making discoveries, fumbling, making mistakes, dying. All of that information is grist for the mill of a deep understanding of what's going on. And they've prevented that by locking us down. They've prevented all of that information from coming from the ground up and rising so that we have a deep understanding of what's going on.
Yeah, and I mean, it's just one of those things that, the pundits, they don't have to put in the work. They can go ahead and spew what everyone just wants to hear, so that way they can gain a bunch of more Twitter followers. I mean, I was discussing this with a relative who's very left of center, still talks to me. We don't talk much about this type of stuff because arguments ensue, but I was talking about the scope monkey trials from, the early end of the early beginning of the 20th century, where you have this public education teacher that wanted to teach evolution just as a theory. He was like, if I have to teach creationism, I might as well teach the other theories. And it's like, here I am. I'm a Liberty University graduate, so you could probably assume my view of evolution, but it's a theory. It's a theory that has a lot of backing behind it. People should at least know it, so that way they can question their own beliefs. And then after they've been educated on it, figure it out themselves. And I feel like a moron because 10 years ago, what I'm saying is a very basic thing. Almost everyone would agree with that. Yeah, we should at least have equal access to things. But it's that equal access point, which, as you mentioned, with, shutting down the conversation entirely, that's going to be, I think, the big challenge, not just for topics like this, but for any topic going further. Absolutely. I'm lucky because of the way I do the show, but my next question is distribution. And that's something that you've got to be worrying about. How do you actually expect to get this out to people?
Yeah, well, like I said before, I am hopeful. We're all hopeful that having the right PR person on board will help us navigate those waters some. It will be kind of a different job than normal PR would have been because, we're going to have to look for new platforms. You're
going to have to find somebody from like the Bush administration to go through all that chaos right there.
Maybe so. Our hope, and maybe it's delusional, but our hope is that if we make this airtight enough in terms of the science and mainstream enough, unlike something like Plandemic, that maybe Netflix would let it slip through. And maybe, by the time we have it is a big if, but it's an aim. And maybe a year from now, the lockdowns will have been enough in the rear view mirror that it won't have been so controversial or won't be so controversial at that time, that it might have some space. All of that, we're going to be navigating and debating and doing whatever we can to find ways to get it out there. I don't have any easy answers at this point because it's all new territory for us as well. But it'll be interesting to see.
And I mean, anything like this that's worth doing is worth doing, not because it's easy, but because it's right. I am going to go ahead and put my money is where my mouth is, folks, I'm actually going to go ahead and after recording this, so by the time you hear it, I'm going to go ahead and contribute a few dollars, because if we talk about these things, it's nice to do that, but we might as well take action. I'll go ahead and be making a donation after this recording. You've sold me on it. It won't be much because I'm a broke bitch, but I might as well try because I believe in it. And I'm hoping that listeners who also believe in this cause will as well. I'm going to go ahead and link to it in the show notes as I mentioned, but if people want to go ahead and check out the trailer and the website and everything else, again, how could they do so?
So that's fundraiser.com/follow the science, and Razor in fundraiser is RAZR. And the website is soundmindcreativegroup.com. I should also give out our email address in case there's somebody who at this point is not interested in donating, but maybe they have a skill that they want to offer or some other information that they want to share with us. So that's soundmindcreativegroup@protonmail.com. And we can be reached there.
Well, sir, I greatly appreciate your time. Best of luck with your efforts, and keep us updated. I'd love to have you back on and talk more, especially as this progresses.
Sounds great. Thank you so much, Remso. I really appreciate it.
Well, folks, conversations like this only happen because of you. It costs you nothing, but it means everything to me. A 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Google Play, wherever you listen to the show across Al Gore's amazing internet. Share it with a friend. Share it with a lover, a hater. You know how to do it. Just keep these conversations going. As always, be good, be safe, and I'll talk to you later.